next presentation, I would like to introduce Greg Shepard. Greg will be presenting on route views and BGP data updates. Greg is a network engineer at Route Views, NSRC, and is coming to us today from Eugene, Oregon. This morning, it seems like we are working away from Vancouver, Seattle, and now we're in Oregon. And Greg is presenting with us at NANOG for the first time, I believe. Though he has been involved in the multicast phase of NANOG meetings since 1998 through 2002, but this is the first time we're having him on stage. So we're really happy to have you, Greg, and welcome.
Thank you. Morning. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me back. It's great. Actually, being here is fascinating. I didn't know if I'd recognize many people, and right away it's been all hallway conversations, and it's fun. There's a lot of white-haired people out here like me, too. Been doing this for a while. Yeah, this is, I think, my first time actually speaking at NANOG, but I'd been an attendee and involved in the infrastructure for a long time. In fact, we were sharing notes about how we used to have to work on getting transit into the hotels. I mean, that was the challenge every time, and now it's like, seems fairly routine. So my slides are in front of me. I hope I can read them as we go. My vision's really bad. It kind of comes with the white hair. So Route View's been around for a long time. My first visit to the U of O was, I think I began there in 97. So that was a couple years after Route Views began, and I inherited it at the time as a box. Would we have a, let's see. Yeah, I can push a button. There we go. So Route Views began as an operator tool. I think it was Randy's original idea. Cisco donated a router, Meyer managed it there, and then I inherited it when I got to the team. So it's now part of the NSRC group, something that is dear to my heart. I've been a volunteer instructor for them for a long time. I think of them as like Internet Peace Corps, teaching technology to developing countries. This is a nonprofit organization, primarily National Science Foundation funded. So Route View fits right into that. You're one of those resources that everybody needs, nobody's willing to pay for. So there we are, we have a home now. We've been archiving this data since 97. There's 50 plus terabytes of data that's there, and began again as a single box, and I'll articulate a little bit how it's expanded out globally. So the NSRC originally was NSF funded, still get some grants as constant grant writing to get the money coming in, both for Route Views and for the NSRC projects themselves. Most recently now we're getting some, I wouldn't say long-term, but longer-term commercial support, where like Google has this as a line item now. It allows us to actually do some planning instead of this desperate 3-year reset all the time. And the U of O, of course, been around for a long time. I know we're in Seattle here. We think we're the biggest Northwest presence ever. And I was involved in the I2 build out at the time, where it was always this, Eugene versus Seattle kind of game. I think I gave a presentation on our multicast at CMU, which is hilarious. Hans will remember this. Someone in the booth who was providing the video stream was mumbling in the background while I was on stage, and they said, "That stuff smells like patchouli oil." So that's what multicast is, I guess, to the rest of the world. So I'm that guy. So why Route Views? Again, at 95, it was an operator tool. You turned up BGP, you send your advertisements out, and like, did it work? The best you could do is trace route somewhere or ping, but that didn't give you a sense of what the global view of your network advertisements were. So Route Views was a box we set up, a 7200. People would eBGP multi-hop peer to us, and then you could hop on that box from the CLI, show IP, BGP sum, show IP, BGP route, and find out what the various locations of those peers saw from your advertisements. It was a fascinating debugging tool, and clearly showed the value of having that visibility. Since then, it has exploded to become a research tool. There's over 1,000 papers published using the Route Views data, and I think I saw several presentations this week, people referencing or even under the covers clearly using Route Views data. Now we've got, this is just some of the tools we have online, so I brought this one out. Like most of our tools, they're a little out of date. We don't have a massive team of people running this stuff. It's been passion along the way, route engineers at the University of Oregon and now the NSRC team. But this tool, provided actually by a team at the U of O, gives a graphical representation of where our collectors are globally. It's actually an interactive map as well. I'll show you a little bit. So I think it was 39 collectors out there. We're like 40 plus, I think, and we've made some contacts this week of getting new collectors up. We're trying to get some sense of where the holes in our data are. And we don't really get all that information back from the research community so much. I mean, there are really they're mining for gold. They're looking and they're defining anomalies. We'd like some feedback from the operator community too, of like where you think the holes are from your perspective in terms of your troubleshooting, some of the tools you may have written using our data sets, and give us some feedback so we can continue to grow to serve the community that we are. Now, we have two types of deployments clearly, right? The physical routers originally, and then now distributed at the exchanges. Sometimes we ship a box, sometimes we get a hosted VM. We try to standardize as best we can. The shipped boxes, it takes some time. We have to have rack and port. We have to have someone put it up for it, need the remote hands and stuff. Whereas we get a virtual, it's really quick, but we still need host. We still need a location, a port on the exchange, and we need transit. Now, we don't transit traffic of any kind. We just gather routes, but we do need to take those routes back to our archive location and also the BMP feed, which I'll discuss a little bit as well. So the hardware is commodity stuff. It's open source software, and our choices really are twofold. It's who's got the features we need and which train is actually being supported. So it's clearly Linux. We had Quagga for a while. We're kind of moving more towards FRR right now. Admittedly, we're seeing some scaling issues with it. Not as performance when things are up, that's fine. It manages all the routes and all the peers, but booting seems to be a problem. So any sort of maintenance will take a long time for it to come up. So I've had some discussions with the Open BGP team. They've scaled that really well. There's some feature gaps. I'm hoping they'll get to play with that a little bit. And the BMP side, I think I go into this a bit more, but we're Open BMP deployed today, but it really hasn't been touched in a long time, so we're a little concerned. Whereas the Go BMP community seems to be an active, ongoing update, so that seems to be where we might be moving. We still do multi-hop. Multi-hop is really easy to bring up. And we did that originally, of course, with the first single router. The pros are it's fast and get it done right away, communication on the line. In fact, I remember back in the 90s, an operator would give me enable on their routers. Never was a problem, right? It was the peace, love, dope, hippie beads internet at the time, and we didn't really care. After the dot-com bomb, then if this config line didn't have revenue attached, it wasn't going to happen, right? So things really slowed down. But we still have multi-hop in place. It does have its purpose, but exchange-hosted locations are much better ways. We're not going to be affected by the route anomalies we're trying to identify. Right? If the peer goes down because the route to that peer is a problem, well, that was the problem we're trying to find, and now we have no way to really look at it. So being at the exchange definitely gives us a better footprint. Now, the exchanges, it depends on where we are, we don't always get full routes there, which is a little unfortunate because that's what we're really trying to get, the global views from various locations around the world as best we can. And it gives us that diversity geographically, it gives us the distributed infrastructure, so it's a little more robust in that way. But it is more to manage, and it means some remote hands. And realistically, the whole route views infrastructure grew organically through relationships like this. Hey, it's a great idea. You're right. I'll host you somewhere. But it's really tough when it's like that guy who has the power, gives us the location, then he moved on. And now we don't have a contact there, and it's kind of hard to get that maintaining. So we're kind of trying to backfill that as best we can, trying to set some sort of common infrastructure because the research community is looking at us saying, this is great, we need you. We need you to be several orders of magnitude larger. Like, well, okay, maybe you need that, but we need to find how we get there, not only in like strategic growth, but how we manage it as an organization as well. And that's going to be a challenge going forward. So all the data that comes back, it's stored in MRT files. And this is a RFC 6396 standard. We dump these in two forms. We get full updates from the RIB every 2 hours, and then we do updates of the RIB itself from every 15 minutes. So full dumps to updates every 15, and all of that stuff is archived. And if you go that, well, I think I have a page here, but that map is a way to get to the archive data, and it's stored on a monthly folder basis. So the files are pretty standard. They're all gzipped in there. And you can go there's archive.routeviews.org, and the map tool is interactive, as I said. We're also starting to add BMP feeds, and it's going through a Kafka infrastructure I'll show you in a little bit. And again, it's one of those things that this is a great idea. Let's roll this stuff out. But of course, nothing scales infinitely, both in people and in resources. So, send email to us if you've got an interesting tool, and we can help you get rolling with it. We haven't cut anyone off yet. I think we'll probably reach a point if we get this, saturated list of people begging for it. But that's a good problem to have, and we'll address that as it shows. So looking at the map here, you just highlight over one of the locations. I gave this similar talk here at the BK NICS in Bangkok just last month, and so I kind of threw this out. But you go to that routeviews.bknix link, that opens up this directory, and you can see by folders. The BKNix only came live in 2019, so this doesn't go way back. But you go to the route views archives, the multi-hops back at the U of O, it goes back to the 90s, and all the data is still there. Like I said, 50 terabytes and growing all the time. We also, I should mention, have mirror locations as well. Google has mirrored all of our stuff, and they actually have provided access for it on their big data platform. So there's some really interesting use cases happening that is not directly managed by us, but we've enabled that through the relationship, which has been really helpful. So how do you peer with us? Pretty straightforward. Talk to us. Hans is in the room. Philip's here, has done a lot of work for us and is always involved. And it's pretty straightforward. We prefer full tables if you can. Remove the defaults, no nulls, no 1918 addresses, of course. We don't support add path. And we don't send any routes back. And clearly we don't send any, any traffic as well. So we need to get everything from you, and then just gets archived. And of course, if this is multi-hop, make sure that's configured correctly. And the MRT tools being a standard, there's a robust suite of tools out there. I just gave a list here. These slides are available online, so you can grab these URLs. Simple Google search will find all this stuff as well. And I go down a little bit here in a couple of slides showing some of the tools that have gone beyond just parsing the file themselves, but actually giving you some API access to script, dynamic access to the tools, and point to different directories. If you're local file repository, you can use the RIPE-RIS data, you can use the route views data, and all of it in combination. Now let's look at some use cases. I think some of you heard of BGP, been around for a bit, kind of rely on it, right? It's the infrastructure. I remember when it was like, oh, this is the temporary solution, like most internet tools. We're still living with it. I remember back in the 90s, being a multicast guy, I'm not going to apologize, but MBGP was originally architected for multicast, and the concern was BGP is the core. It is fragile, don't touch it, don't put features on it. MBGP was like bolted on the side of BGP4 from Cisco at the time. Now, in the IETF, we stick everything in BGP. That whole game of being fragile, I guess, has been tossed out the window, and now it's soup to nuts. So there's even PIM join messages are in BGP, just to throw that out. We have command line access to all this, all the collectors. So the collectors are live out there. You can actually log into them without a password and take a look at, show IP, BGP sum, routes, whatever. We ask you to be careful. This is a public resource. It's not something you can script to. We prefer, we actually rate limit the telnet access to prevent you from hammering it like that with a script. But it is there for, quick viewing. In fact, I spoke with someone just yesterday. They said they've bounced jobs as an operator in various locations, and they have their own views, but they're habitually just telnet into a route views collector and look at what's happening remotely. So a lot of people are using it day to day, just logging in. Did I hit the right button? I did. There we go. All right. So how do you access the collectors? We have a naming convention that's a little weird. Admittedly, all the historical, I'll go into how we've changed that a little bit, but it's route-views, star being like one of the numbers. Those are the multi-hops. So I think we have 2, 4, 5, and 6 or something at the U of O. And again, don't script. There's an API that actually supports that as well. And people ask, why not SSH? There's nothing to secure, right? Nothing to hide. There's no password access to it as well. So just jump in. Now, this is not a forwarding router. It's only collecting routes. So if you look for next hop, it's not going to be correct. We've got a default route pointing to our transit provider so we can archive the data from MRT files as well as the BMP feed. But you're not going to get that look from the fib. There is no fib in the box from the RIB we're getting from BGP. So that's a little bit. It's just the default kernel entry. So again, we had the route views, route-views.routeviews 2, 3, 4, and 6. The legacy naming stuck, route-views, the exchange name, and then routeviews.org. That got a little cumbersome, and well, I don't know the history for that necessarily, but it was a little odd. So looking at the naming convention changes today, we're going towards, at least in the newest deployment, like in Malaysia, it's the name of the exchange, the closest airport, then routeviews.org. So it just seems to be a little more logical. I don't know what the migration path is in changing the old naming. There's a lot of scripts being written to the old naming convention, so that's going to probably break things if we do it collectively. but I think we're going to start migrating that as we get ample engineering resources, right? Yeah, lots of people here helping out. All right, so we've added some new features recently. The BMP feeds I mentioned, and ARPKI is now part of many of the collectors. So you can actually go there and look for valid and invalid RPKI that's right at the collector itself. It's great. And that data is actually being archived. Probably going to backfill some of that stuff from what we get from the ROAs. And the, let's see, BMP feeds, again, like, yeah, just talk to us. There's tools out there also for the BMP feeds. The BMP stream I'll talk about in Artemis is out there. I think the tool we saw presented yesterday was a commercial version of what was the Artemis project, which is still open source. So, and I believe CADA has an active Artemis deployment today too. So you can poke at it and take a look at the route views view. And it gives you a nice, graphical user interface. So in data distribution, live feeds is really the game. If you're trying to find hijacks and mitigation as quickly as possible, getting the live feed is the best way to do that. So we have a Kafka infrastructure for live telemetry using BMP. You get the timestamps and metadata all associated with that. And RPK infrastructure's got tons of tools out there available to pull into that. Looking like this. So on the BMP side, we don't BMP with our peers sourcing the BGP traffic itself. We just do a regular BGP session. Part of that initially was just the lack of BMP support in platforms at the time. Now it seems to be fairly ubiquitous out there, but I think we've found that BMP feeds from the peers are noisy, and having the collector kind of dampens that. And what we get is what the collector's dynamic view is, as opposed to every peer's dynamic view. And that seems to be the best compromise in terms of what we deploy, what we maintain, and what the data set looks like. OpenBMP is the game right now. Of course, like I said, we haven't seen updates in 2018. So we're kind of moving towards GoBMP because it's getting updated consistently. We have to stick on. We are not a team of software engineers writing these tools. We're depending on open source tools like you guys do as well. And we try to find that, like water, finding the lowest path to get ourselves to where we need to be. Then that gets fed into Kafka infrastructure, which is currently hosted at the U of O. And again, this has a scaling limit. I think ideally we can move that off to a cloud provider somewhere and have it go up, but that would require someone to help fund the cloud provider. If you can think of anyone by name that just comes to mind, feel free to make some suggestions. If you happen to have a hat or a paycheck with that name on it, jump in. Excuse me, give us a hand. We'll all welcome it. And because we're using the Kafka infrastructure, we've got 16 different programming languages supporting the Kafka infrastructure. So accessing BMP feeds via Kafka is a robust set of tools out there to use. And send email to help@routeviews.org. I think someone responded to help. It's like, you guys never respond. Like, you got response right away. We're there. We are paying attention. We are basically, chasing our tails, trying to find, fixing the holes in the dam as we go along and growing as we can strategically. But we are a group of people. We are human beings. Feel free to reach out to us. And if you send help to RouteViews asking for a Kafka feed, you'll probably get one right away until we reach some saturation point. We haven't got there yet, so go for it. Let's see if we can find it. So I mentioned BGP Stream. It's a suite of tools out there, and I threw the URLs up there. It's supported by CADA. I think the guy who wrote this now moved to Georgia Tech. Someone was pointing that out to me recently. They're still being maintained, which is great. But you get the BGP readers, one of them in the stream tools. And then they've got the live stream for writing your own stuff, and it's even in Python as well. So they've got a full API support in 2 languages that gives you parsing and searching within MRT files, and also, I believe, the BMP feeds. This is the Artemis tool. It looks similar like what you might have seen yesterday. It's an open source tool that, again, lets you point at various public archives and a BMP feed to do correlation and dynamic searching for events. And we've got the BHPKit, which, it's a Rust-based MRT BGP data parser. So it does the same thing. You can look at the BMP feeds, you can go back and archive, like, okay, we noticed an event. When did this happen? Has it happened, periodically? Is this something that's been going on for some time? The broker's got a REST API for searching those files. And there's a BGPKit monocle. It's a command line application. Basically, kind of massage your way through what you're thinking, and then you can script it after the fact. And then, of course, there's your URL to find it and play with it. And here's a not so open source use case. I thought I'd throw that out there. I was talking to Vixie yesterday because all his work at ISC, and then like, well, what do you do when you've got a wonderful resource that everybody wants and needs and no one's willing to pay for? We haven't found a way to monetize that. We're concerned that it's going to risk our relationship with the community that we established already, and that's like public access to it. But we do need to find some way to keep the doors open, not just in the scale that we are, but targeting the growth that this research community really wants us to get, and finding the holes that we have where we know strategically we need to be in certain locations we're not getting data today. So, like I said, feel free to send money. I think the ushers are handing baskets out in the aisles today. So I just hopped on the Route Views collector at the U of O and just kind of poke around to see what I can see. And this one has 77 peers listed. Not all of them are up. Again, some of these are probably really old. Met someone in an analog hallway 15 years ago. It's great. Sat down with laptops, brought up the peering. They've moved on. Peering went down. We don't have a contact. It's kind of hard to hunt that down. We're trying to clean some of that up. We're trying to get some actually mailing lists established at different collectors where we do have a relationship. I think personally it's best if our host at the exchange is the exchange, because they have all the relationship with the peers there. It's easier to go back, and it becomes not just a relationship in the hallway, which is great to start it, but an actual established relationship with a contact so that when things change or go down, we have a way to fix it. We have a way to keep the service running for you as a community. And you can see, looking at this, we've got full tables for many of the peers. Not all of them give us full tables again. We can't dictate what you do give us, but we know the full table view from a remote location is the most valuable to the community as well as the research groups. Poking at it again, just odd anomalies come out. Here's 23 prepends for some reason. Now that same 11432 is carrying the second advertisement without the prepend. And we don't know why this is there. And again, talking to a researcher actually this week was very kind of eye-opening. There's tons of noise like this in the data. And if it doesn't go past a single hop, a single collector, it's probably just a configuration problem, some legacy ignorance that just got dropped on the floor somewhere, and it's not necessarily malicious. And I think majority of the weirdness I see in just looking at the data myself is misconfiguration, unintentional incompetence, whatever it would be. But it's really looking at that, trying to find the malicious attacks that are going beyond just a misconfig. Another example, I just did ARPKI invalid and poked around, and I found this prefix, which is being originated from 2 different ASNs. Again, is that a configuration mistake? Is it a hijack? Is it just a migration that they haven't completed? It's hard to say. So I dug around a bit, looked at the prefix itself, and it's owned by an organization in Palestine. So looking at the anomalous AS of origin, and it's located in Turkey. Okay, I don't know if that's a valid use case, but look at the AS of the other paths, and they actually own an entire block of ASs that covers the one that's advertising from Turkey. Again, I don't know what the relationship is. I'm just kind of looking at weirdness that's out there. And this is probably most likely just an anomalous regional misconfiguration or a migration that's taking place. But it tells you, there's a lot of things to look at there. And if this was your network, you would have this view to see, oh, goodness, I mistyped something, or I haven't cleaned up that old configuration. It gives you a public view of what your network looks like to the rest of the world. So looking at them, what is it? 203905 is the primary origin, and we've got this other one poking out there, which is owned by the same block from a different country. Again, I don't know if this is malicious or not. Most likely it's just some odd misconfig. So other bits, jump on the list. I'm told it's not really live now for 2 years, and we tried to clean this slide up and it was too late. I already shipped it. So the mailing list apparently is not that live, but help@routeviews.org is a bunch of humans. Some of us are in the room today, like I mentioned. Feel free to reach out to us if you've got a location to host, if you want to jump in as a peer. Remember, if you've used RouteViews in any capacity, I'm not saying it's your responsibility to peer back with us, but you should at least understand the value as a user and therefore have some sort of sense of responsibility to then contribute. And just throw some quotes in here. For some of you guys know these people. Of course, Jeff, I think, was presenting a couple days ago. I won't read this all to you. Feel free to look it up yourself. But just pull out a couple lines. This vast collection of data is a valuable research data source in its own right. It's grown as a resource for us, the operators. And because we've archived this over time, it's become a robust set of data for research as well. Another quote, Aptab Siddiqui, there we go. Again, the one I like the best here. Actively maintaining route views provides community service by NSRC. I have my uniform on today. I'm proud to be part of this organization. I've been a volunteer instructor for them for a long time. I think I taught with them for the first time in the first AFNOG in 2000. And since then, moved off in the multicast game. And now I found myself unemployable, playing with cars in my barn, and Steve called me up and said, "Hey, heard you're bored." I wouldn't say I'm bored, but what I missed was talking to smart people about interesting problems. And then trying to get passionate about something like jump into someone else's toolbox and trying to care about what they've built. It's kind of hard to do when you're old and gray. But I believe in this as a tool, as a resource, as a community, and I believe in Steve and NSRC as an incredible, valuable global resource. And to be part of them is like, I'm proud to be part of this group. So it's fun to see quotes from people who feel the same way. Some other great quotes. You may have heard of John Postel. We got shirts with his quotes on it, but this one always jumps out to me. The internet works because a lot of people cooperate to do things together. That's why we're here. I mean, the standards have worked in a way that we all do the same thing. We agree on certain levels. And because of that, we've built this global infrastructure. Route Views is no different, right? It's here because this is your internet. And you have the right to this data. Please give it to us as a community, and we together can then grow healthfully. Questions? Can anyone here spell PIM?
Hi, Tony Tauber, Comcast. Definitely a big fan of this, and thankful that it keeps going. One thing is, and I think I talked to you about it, but for other people, some of the feeds appear to be iBGP feeds. Some appear to be customer feeds. It can vary. I think I think an internal feed is maybe less useful, or yields more questionable stuff that's, not, it might be more confusing to researchers or other people. I don't know if other folks have opinions on this, but trying to coalesce people on some guidance where, things are more comparable in what shows up in route views might be helpful, but maybe I'm wrong on that.
No, that's great feedback. I mean, we do provide that, but we can't configure their end. Right. And I think in general, we don't want internal routes, and they usually don't want to give us internal routes anyway, which is, as you pointed out, it's really of no value to what's happening globally, inside your neighborhood. Many of the times when you see that, it's probably a misconfiguration. The bigger challenge is when we're at an exchange and we get all of the exchange peer routes. But, okay, that's good, showing this cross connectivity at the region, but it doesn't give us the global views. We really prefer to get global feeds from everyone. But again, we ask, and that's all we can do.
Yeah, understood. Thanks.
Hello, Aaron Nataj from ARPKI. So thanks for the presentation. I'm curious if, I know you mentioned that now you have funding by NSF and Google, but how can the community help in general? If there are any gaps that we can possibly fill in terms of the funding side. Particular storage has been an issue in the past. I don't know what that is today. And then second to that, like you had touched on just briefly getting BMP feeds from peers directly, but mentioned like a high noise to signal ratio.
Yeah.
I'm curious like where that discussion has gone, in particular like pre-policy feeds. I know Tony just talked about iBGP data that may not be as relevant, but like from the research perspective, the pre-policy feeds are pretty interesting. So yeah.
It's a challenging conversation with the research group, and I don't want to point fingers or call out names at all, but we've asked, like, where do you see holes in the data? Where would you see us rolled out? And they say, we'd like you to be everywhere, all the time. We want thousands and thousands of collectors. Okay, that's great, and maybe we need to be there, but how do we get there strategically? Like, where are our low-hanging fruit and gaps? And that's hard. So that's why I'm asking the community as well. If you have resources, please send, hunt down Hans. He's right over here. Or send help at routeviews.org, and because that's it. If you are at a location where we're looking for a host, boom, we're there. And if you have some resources you want to kick back in and get your name put on a T-shirt or on the website, please kick down. Hans will be more than happy to hook you up with Steve and team and make this thing happen. Appreciate you reaching out.
Thank you.
Patrick Gilmore, Meta. One, thank you so much for just doing everything here. I've been using route views for decades, and it's amazing.
Thank you.
So you used to support SSH, and I don't know if you're aware, but the typical Mac OS does not ship with Telnet anymore. People keep telling me to use Netcat, and yes, it works, but there's lots of other microservices, scripting, et cetera, where Telnet is not allowed for various and sundry reasons. Have you considered setting up one of them to allow SSH? I know there's a CPU limitation on some, like route views.
To what gain?
So that somebody can actually SSH when they're not allowed to Telnet for
Oh, right.
administrative
You've
or
got
other
some
reasons.
corporate limitations of firewall. Don't let Telnet in or out. Yeah, this first request I've heard of it. But that's an interesting use case we should probably consider addressing.
Well, if nobody else wants it, then never mind. But I thought I'd ask.
Feel free to build it for us.
Hello, Jeff Bartig, Internet 2. I've been using route views probably since close to the beginning. Had several discussions this week with people doing research and using route views data and other similar data sources for looking at detecting route leaks, things like that. And one of the things they seem to struggle with is remotely understanding the relationships between ASs. Has there been any discussion about route views providing like a standard set of communities that willing networks could tag their routes with to indicate the relationship?
Wow. I've never been in a conversation where route view has been involved in policy. We're really kind of reflective of what the community is doing. So if the community has a policy like that, it'll show up. The communities all show up in the route views data.
But every network uses different community tags for
True,
represent things.
true.
Some of them don't share the community, some do.
Well, there's RFCs out there that talk about, common communities, but that doesn't mean people are going to use them just because it's documented. And the same case, I guess, would be in ours. Assuming we took on a policy hat and wanted to do that, doesn't mean people are going to do it.
Right.
I think it would make more sense to have it take place in an organization like this, where you actually can then, because even if we did it in some way, we would just be facilitating a conversation with the community. We're not going to dictate this stuff, but if the community decides
I wasn't suggesting dictating. I was just saying,
okay.
If you want to tag customer routes, peer routes, transit routes, internal routes, whatever, with these tags, and leave it optional for people who are willing to share the data.
Excellent. If the community decides to do something like that, we will reflect it. Absolutely.
Okay.
This young man over here, please.
Randy, if you could fix my age, I'd shut up. Randy Bush, Arcus, IAJ Research. Let's get the history correct. Route Views leader at the time, David Myers, published an RFC specifically marking with communities the different aspects of the routes being announced. Unfortunately, David was a great complicator, so he couldn't resist adding things like country and the color of the operator's hair, etc. So that all fell flat on the floor. There is an existing internet draft out there suggesting specifically what the general person over there asked for. You might pay attention to it, and let's try to move it forward.
Thank you, Randy. All right. Am I going over? I'm going over. Any questions? More? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.